and did our test. Muscle tissue functions in movement. Muscle tissue functions in movement, and there are 3 separate kinds of muscle. Skeletal muscle is responsible for voluntary movements. So you can control your skeletal muscle. You'll get into the details of skeletal muscle in the 1220 course when you look at the musculoskeletal system. Cardiac muscle pumps blood. That's its sole object in life. And smooth muscle moves walls of your internal organs, such as the stomach. So smooth muscle can be just a second. So smooth muscle can be circular. So if you have a blood vessel like that, the smooth muscle can be circular around the vessel. It can be longitudinal, so that's circular. It can be longitudinal, so it could run along the sides of the vessel. And it can even be oblique. Or angular. So the muscle, for example, the smooth muscle around your stomach is all 3. So in digestion, some of it is really mechanical digestion. Your teeth start with breaking down food, and then your stomach churns the food into smaller pieces, and it also mixes the digestive juices with the food that you've eaten. They're quite distinguishable. I've only got one slide that I'm showing you about skeletal muscle, just this one. The distinguishable features are that skeletal muscle has these lines, and those lines are called striations. Technically, they're Z lines, so they are the parts of the muscle where the actin and myosin is attached, and they're the ones that individually contract, but because the nervous system will stimulate the whole muscle will contract at one time. So that's a distinguishing feature of skeletal muscle. Another one is that they're very long, in that they move some of your long bones, your legs, your femur, your humerus, and such. Another distinguishing feature is that because they're so long, they need to have more than one nucleus. So they're multinucleate. A long cell like that needs to have the products that the genes code for that are in the nucleus. So your DNA codes for proteins. That's what the entire cell requires. One nucleus with its DNA is not going to be enough for the entire cell. So here they are, the nuclei. And they're really squashed a little bit along the edges of the cell. So each one of these is a separate muscle cell. Of course, tissue is defined as a group of cells functioning together in the same, for the same function. So skeletal muscle is there to move your skeleton, and all of the cells work together to do that. Cardiac muscle is also striated, but one difference between cardiac muscle and smooth muscle is that it's branched. And one difference that you've seen already when you looked at cells is that in between the cells are junctions known as intercalated discs. And so today we're going to talk about the different kinds of junctions between cells. They've come up as we've gone along. Desmosomes have come up, tight junctions have come up, gap junctions. So I'd like to define those today using videos of other people. Cardiac muscle. Smooth muscle is differently shaped. It's spindle shaped. Spindle shaped. That's a shape something like that. It has one nucleus. But they do manage to I'm not drawing this all that well, but they do manage to be quite tightly packed, smooth muscle. So the functions of them all are skeletal muscle is obvious, I guess. We had that, didn't we? We had that in the previous slide, so we don't need to write it again. Yeah, skeletal muscle is voluntary to move the bones of your body and to move you. Cardiac muscle and smooth muscle are both involuntary. You have no conscious control over your cardiac muscle or smooth muscle. There are ways where you can train yourself to be calm and slow your heart rate, that's true. But you have nodes in your heart that give you a heart rate of 100 beats per minute or so automatically. And your autonomic nervous system, which we'll look at, slows that down to about 70 beats per minute. If you were to cut that autonomic system, your heart rate would speed up to 100 beats per minute. But it's involuntary. And your smooth muscle is also involuntary. But it's triggered by things like swallowing food. So there may be a stretch reflex. When food goes into your esophagus, it forms a bolus, so a small ball that your tongue basically forms. When it goes into your esophagus, so that it's not so large that it will choke you, it'll be small enough to go into your esophagus, but it does cause a stretching, which triggers peristalsis, or the movement of smooth muscle. And the last tissue I'd like to talk about is nervous tissue. And since we're looking at the nervous tissue, the nervous system rather, I don't really need to go into too much detail because we will be looking at it again in very great detail. However, it does have a different function from all the other tissues we looked at so far, which is to be a communication network. So the nervous tissue consists of these very small cells here. There's loads of those, these teeny ones. These are the nuclei. And these are called glial cells. Sometimes they're called neuroglia. It's all one word. And those are accessory cells to the actual nerve cells themselves, which are called neurons. So this is a neuron, and they're fairly distinguishable. They're kind of stellate shaped, in other words, shaped a bit like a star. Their extensions are dendrites and axons, usually just one axon. And they function in communication. The cell body is where the branches come from. So the dendrites come out of the cell body, the axon comes out of the cell body. It's also known as a soma. Yeah, nervous tissue. And I'd like to end our tissue lecture there. Thank you for watching.